Welcome to Stage Dive, a podcast where we go deep on the art of live performance to help artists perform better on stage. I am your host, Jack Dawkins. I am a rapper, poet, and storyteller out of Boulder, Colorado. I have a few quick announcements for all of you listeners out there. I have new music that is releasing all the time. I have a few shows coming up, and I also have what I call the Contemplation Collective. It is a guided visualization that I host most Fridays, unless I'm traveling or some other things have come up. But it's a really wonderful space that we create. It is intended for anyone who wants to join. It is completely free, and it's really just an opportunity for you to take 15 to 20 minutes, unplug from life for a second, and just get connected to your breathing and to hopefully go on a little bit of a journey that makes you feel calm, peaceful, and centered. If you want to learn about more of any of those things, you can go to www.jackdawkinsraps.com/linktree, LINKTREE. Our guest today is Diane. She is an artist and an actress from Miami, Florida. She does improv, she does stand-up. She even has her own one-woman show, which I would love to go and see. Our conversation is incredibly wide-ranging. We talk about performance anxiety. We talk about whether you would rather have a negative reaction or no reaction at all from a crowd. And we talk about what it's like to be a woman in stand-up comedy, even still today. It was a really, really wonderful dialogue, and I know you'll enjoy the conversation. So without further ado, here's the episode with Diane Mendoza. So the question I'm going to start with is, do you feel comfortable at this point calling yourself a comedian or a stand-up?
I do, and I'm going to turn my phone off. See, I'm going to, there we go. I do. I mean, here's the thing. If someone's like, are you a professional stand-up comedian or are you professional, I mean, I'm not there yet in the sense of like where I'm getting paid consistently to do it. Right. And that is, a goal among many others, but
100%.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with calling myself a stand-up comedian, calling myself a comedian, an artist. I'm comfortable with
artist.
That.
Ooh, nice.
Yes. An artiste.
An artiste. Was there
to tell
like
vagina jokes? You have to have a certain sense of artistry.
The few, the proud. Only the few and the proud can tell vagina jokes on stage.
Yeah,
to octogenarians.
Tastefully. And meaning that my vagina is tasty. Yes. There's an Adderall shortage. I'm sorry. This is what you're going to get for the rest of this interview. It's just going to be a lot of inappropriate things coming together. It's going to be great.
I mean, you're just workshopping your set during the interview. That's just real
Not really, but I mean, I guess I could add that in. Sure.
You never know. I'm curious, like for that comfort of calling yourself a comedian, like I totally hear you on like, am I professional versus not? But like, no, like I'm a comedian. I get up and I tell jokes. Was there like a moment where it felt like that happened? Or was it just kind of like at some point you had done it enough and you're like, yeah, fuck it. Like, of course.
Yeah. I think I had done it enough at so many points. Like, cause I don't just do stand up. I've also done like improv and sketch, and I've done characters and song parodies and things like that. And I've been performing for so long, like not so much with stand-up, but just doing comedy in general, that eventually I'm just like, yeah, I'm a comedian. I mean, I have a day job too, right? But I usually lead with the, sorry, there's a bug in my face, Florida. But yeah, it's just, I've said it over and over to the point where I am there. I think, therefore I am. So,
yeah, very much so. Like, was you always attracted to comedy? Did you find it later in life? Like, how did that all get started?
I wasn't a popular kid. So that comes with a lot of teasing and being made fun of. And one day I just made fun of people back, and apparently it landed me in the principal's office a couple times. It made some kids cry, but made a lot of other people laugh. Where I'm like, oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like, I was perpetuating the cycle of bullying, but at 7, 8 years old, you're not thinking that
You're just trying to
you're thinking it's
survive.
not that complex, like,
Yes.
oh, if I make fun of other people that are making fun of me, they'll stop making fun of me and they'll actually like me, right? So I think like when I was 8 years old is probably when I first discovered I was funny. I don't know if you ever played this game growing up, but that game, Make Me Laugh. Like you sit down and someone comes up to you and they try and make you laugh.
Okay. I was
It
like,
was a thing.
so there's that version, and there's also like someone has to take a big swig of milk and hold it in their mouth, and then you try to make them laugh. Like
Yeah,
offshoot of the game, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
yeah. So when I always like win, like I'd always like make people laugh, you
Yep.
know. And yeah, that's how I started to discover like, there's this part of my personality that I could use to, you know, win friends and gain influence. I sound like the
You're
cover of like a sales book,
yeah.
but
Well, so like but that brings up an interesting question, right? So like
yeah,
humor has external benefits. There's a reason sense of humor is listed on like every job application, every fucking dating profile. Like no one
yeah,
wants to be with someone who's deathly serious, not awesome.
yeah.
But I'm curious, like if you look internally, like what has humor done for you and like your inner work?
That's a great question. I think it's both good and bad in the
Mm,
sense of, so I took a psychology class once and I learned about all these defense mechanisms. And humor is a very popular defense mechanism.
for
And
sure.
the way I see humor is a way to make the bitterness of life a little sweeter.
Mm,
A lot of times when people make what they call inappropriate jokes, it's because they're trying to comprehend or they're trying to process something that is traumatic or something that is hurtful or something that is cruel to its essence.
yep.
So I think with humor, it's helped me process a lot of the things in my life
Hmm.
and not look at them completely seriously, or not like to not get so wrapped up in the gravity of the moment. Like
Mm,
for example, my mom passed right at the beginning of COVID, right? And thank you so much for that. But
yeah.
and initially, when my mom had her stroke and things like that too, like there's all these things that happened. I've been able to, for example, while she was suffering through all that, like make her laugh at the hospital and try to like bring
Mm,
some levity to a moment that's serious. But there's also like how I referenced earlier, sometimes humor, there's a fine line of it being hurtful and not hurtful, right?
yeah.
Are people misconceiving your intention with the humor? Um, so obviously, for example, there's also cute jokes being made about people of color, people of different, gender identities, people of different sexual orientations, and things like that. And that's where, you know, there's this adage of punching up, right? Punching up as opposed to punching down on people who are
Right.
already systemically being oppressed one way or another, right? So I think humor has helped me in a lot of ways, but sometimes I've taken a joke too far and offended someone. But not just so much on stage, but like off stage.
Mm.
Because I'm working on this, but I don't really have a good brain to mouth filter. You know what I mean? Like it's just untapped spring water of
Here
words.
it comes.
It's here it comes. There are times where oh, I'm like, excuse me, I'll be back. Because I literally don't want to spurt out something I know that could potentially be hurtful to someone. So
Mm.
I think the humor has helped me more than it has hurt me, but it's hurt me at times, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable. I'm curious, like you alluded to this a little bit, like as someone who enjoys stand up but is certainly not participating in it, I do. There's a lot of chatter about like how difficult it is right now to be a teller of jokes because there are so many hot buttons and landmines and like, and now even weirder, like the audience is more and more galvanized to like stand up and be like, hey, fuck you, that offends me. And I was like, oh, okay, like heard, understood, cool.
Right.
Like, I don't know how the other 299 people are feeling about it, but I'm glad that I know exactly how you specifically feel
Right.
about this joke.
Right.
So like, is that, in your experience, is that true? Is that overblown? Like, what's been your experience of like?
I think, I mean, I'm in Florida too, where I feel, because for example, I have a friend of mine that lives in New York. She lives in upstate New York, but she has like she has daughters that live in the city, and she'll do
Okay.
stand up in the city, and she'll do stand up in upstate New York, and then she'll come down here and we'll do a couple gigs together. And she's like, I literally could say whatever I want down here because everyone in New York is so like uptight, or the thing is, again, there's some jokes that get like a groan, like from some people, like ooh,
Yeah.
right? Or there might be like one person who's offended by something. Most of the time when I've gotten heckled, it's either like they're heckling. I have one ear where I can't hear as well as the other ear because I ruptured my eardrum. Long story, but for whatever reason, I still have hearing loss from that time. So sometimes I just kind of power through my set, and that's that. But I mean, I think you have to be true to your voice ultimately, right? Like you're the product, your point of view is what you're presenting in jokes, or a skewed point of view, right? Because sometimes me, the person I am on stage is pretty close to the person I am in real life, but there's some people who have like a persona that's kind of different, or I mean, again, it's a part of them, but it's not the way they present in real life, right? So but ultimately it's a point of view that you're selling, right? So the best thing is just to really come with that point of view. I mean, I try to be sensitive to certain things, and I tried to make sure if I'm making a joke about something that's sensitive, it's coming from my point of view versus like being edgy for edgy's sake.
Yes.
Like just saying something that will ruffle feathers for the sake of ruffling feathers. If I ruffle feathers, it's because I want to ruffle those feathers.
Right. Or you've had an experience in your life that gives you a unique perspective on why those feathers might need to be ruffled, or there could be a benefit to ruffling said feathers.
Right.
Would you rather have someone like actively groan or be silent? Like, which is worse when you're on stage?
Silence.
Like the nothing. No, I like
the nothing. It depends. Because again, I've done acting and improv and stuff. Sometimes when you're on stage and people are silent, sometimes it's because they're like just paying attention to what you're saying. Sure. But when you're doing stand up in particular, silence is like, it means, did I not get to you? Did I not elicit a reaction? Was that not funny? The groan depends. The groan could be like, that wasn't funny, or whoa, that was
the cringe. Yeah,
you went too far. The cringe, right? When there's a brand of there's cringe comedy out there, right? I don't think of myself as a cringe comic. I hope not, right? But I mean, there's some people. No, because I mean, I'm not trying to be a cringe comic, right? But there's some people who that's their style, and that's great for them, But yeah, for whatever reason, silence during a stand-up set. I mean, obviously, when I'm saying the setup to the punchline, yeah, I want silence. But I don't know. I like noises to drown out the sounds in my head that constantly ask, "Why am I doing this?" While I'm up there.
Does that still happen to you?
Sometimes.
Okay.
And it's weird. Like right before I go on stage, for a split second, my mind's like, "What the fuck are we doing?
Don't do it.
Fuck it." What is it, that Leroy Jenkins on Twitch? The guy who just like, fuck all your plans. I'm just gonna go on the assault regardless of what we talked about. Leroy Jenkins. That's every time I go up on stage. Like the moment right before, they're like, "Oh, Diane Jorge," or if they mispronounce my name, Diane Jorge. And I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? Leroy Jenkins. And I just go. It's just like a split moment where I'm just like, oh.
Some small part of your nervous system is like, no, we don't want to die. Don't go up there.
No,
It's too scary.
This is fight or flight. Flight, bitch. Flight. Caca, grow some wings. Flight. Caca! Like, fly away. Dear God, make me a bird so I can fly far, far, far away. Forrest Gump reference for anyone that didn't get that.
That's so good. Oh my God.
Dear God, make me a bird. Okay.
Yeah. Is there any, like, obviously, like, the content of your set, I imagine, is constantly evolving. There's new jokes, there's new setups, new points of inflection. Are there any, like, points of craft, whether it be like timing, set structure, crowd work, like, that you're really digging into right now?
Honestly, it's writing. My writing. It's I talk a lot. By nature, like, I am a very talkative person, and sometimes it takes me 20 words to say something that would take like 2, like goodbye, instead of like, oh man, I really had a great time, but I have to get going, and I just ramble on, and I don't know when to stop. I said this to someone off the cuff. They're like, this is part of your set, but I told someone was like, oh, Diane, you're going to be in like Lifetime Christmas movies or something. And I'm like, listen, I don't know if I could, like, someone was saying, oh no, but this one talks too much. You'd probably like have to carry the whole movie. I'm like, listen, if I had a Lifetime Christmas movie and it was titled A Christmas Miracle, it would be a silent film. Like, like I'm working on more precise wording. And just being a little more present on stage in the sense of like, because I have very severe ADHD. I know I've mentioned it to you, Jack, a couple of times, but like, my attention span is everywhere. Mind you, I was doing a set and police sirens are going off. And this is like where my ADHD kind of pays off. So a bunch of police sirens went off. I was on stage. I immediately ducked. I just immediately ducked. So I'm like, oh, I just ducked because I got so distracted by the police sirens. I'm like, shit, I forgot what I was going to say. So I just ducked to make it look like it was a bit.
Oh my God. I mean, quick thinking on your feet, bringing some physical comedy to the set. More
police sirens kept coming. And I was like, okay, I can't do the joke again. But it was very distracting. And you see, in fact, I got so distracted that I forgot what the original question was. Oh, the points what I'm working on. So yeah, more concise wording and trying to like just be more connected to the audience. So that way I don't let all the things going on distract me.
Right.
I think, for example, that police siren thing, that was a funny thing. Okay. But it's those two things. It's the rambling, which you can tell I do a lot of, and being more present and connected with the audience. So, and obviously writing, that's something I have to do every day. I don't do it as much as I would like to, but I try to do it as much as possible.
What does your writing practice look like?
So here's the thing. I've never been like a sit down with a pen and paper and write person. Sure. It's good to have the jokes written out so that way you can cut out words or see if you can replace words or, move things around. But I tend to record a lot of things on my phone. Okay. There's a bunch of like different recording apps like Evernote or things like that. But I use I have an Android phone. Sorry, I'm a green bubble. I know. People are like,
the enemy of all group chats.
People will be like, Jack, did you just let this green bubble bitch up in your podcast? What year does she live in? No. But there's a Google recorder app that will transcribe everything you're saying.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's certain words they'll get wrong. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate. Sometimes I'll video record my sets or sometimes I'll audio record my sets depending on logistically what I can do.
Sure.
And when I audio record my sets and the room is small enough, it'll pick up on laughter. And it'll literally say speech, laughter as it plays. Like, you'll see like the sound file. then you'll see the sound waves or whatnot. It'll be like speech, laughter, so um I record a lot of my stuff initially and then I'll write it out and edit from
Mm.
there. Or sometimes I'll revisit something I wrote, because sometimes I'll do like a little notes app. Like I'll think of, let's say I'm out somewhere socially where I can't be like Captain's Log, Stargate, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
As much as I
So
would love for you to do that in the grocery
like be
store.
like Captain's Log, Stargate. So sometimes I'll open up the notes app and write a couple of notes. I'll come back to it. Sometimes it's out of context because I'm like, wait a minute, what was I thinking? That's why I like to voice record everything in terms of ideas if it comes to me, because I just rant and rant and I'm like, okay, this is funny. This isn't. This is funny. No, that's
Mm.
not funny. That could be funny, but let me see if I can add more context to it. So, um, yeah, it's a lot of, I do a lot of voice notes.
Yeah.
Or sometimes at open mic, like here's the thing. It depends on the room. If it's a room I'm really comfortable in, like the room where I know a lot of people, I'll tend to rant and see what like comes out is funny. And I'll even warn
Mm.
people like, hey, I'm just ranting. I'm seeing what works. If you don't think this is funny, that's fine. Look in the mirror that you're funny looking enough. Let's do this. Like,
Let's rock and roll. Yeah.
let's rock and roll. Yeah.
That's so awesome. I took a class on stand up at the beginning of the pandemic, and I remember like
Yeah.
there's so many different methodologies for how you can mine jokes, but ranting, like, because what you're ultimately doing is you're tapping into emotion,
Yep.
usually anger, maybe a version of rage, could be some sadness like underpinning
Yeah.
there,
A
but you
lot of
actually
comedy is rooted in that. And that like
100%.
you've heard the whole the adage of tragedy plus time equals comedy, right?
Yes.
So, and again, humor ultimately, I think at its core is a defense mechanism,
Right.
to a form of entertainment, sure, but it's a defense mechanism, right? To make the less palatable, at least palatable, or
Yeah. It's so true. Like there's funny nuance to it though. Like, so I've done
yeah,
more like storytelling, long form, fewer
right.
punchlines, but obviously like
I've
if
done
you tell us,
storytelling too, which is very freeing, by the way. I love it.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful. I like
I
can
love it.
recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, I won a moth
That's right.
in July.
Which is awesome. That's
I
so
had
rad.
no I had no plans on performing that day, but it was fun. It was really
And
fun.
you won, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, and the piece I always find so interesting is, again, like you mentioned, there's this thin line between like when it's still funny versus when like, ooh,
It's
like
mean or yeah.
it's mean or any choose your adjective or your emotion.
Right.
It's the same thing with storytelling. Like sometimes people are presenting the emotion of an experience authentically and vulnerably, and you feel them in that moment, or you connect to a story you have where you felt that thing and
Right.
it's so fucking beautiful. And other
Yeah.
times you're watching someone basically go through self-therapy on stage, and it's so hard to watch because it's like, ooh, you haven't actually cleaned this up yet. Like you're
You haven't
basically just making a
processed it.
fucking mess on stage and asking us to watch you just like shit your pants on stage. And like,
Right.
I, I I will always say I give everyone credit who is willing to get up and grab a mic. Like I applaud you. I love that
Yep.
you're up there. We need more of it, even when it's not exactly what I would want to consume. But ooh,
Right.
fuck! Like if we could have a better support system, so it's like, hey, before you like go to the moth or the open mic or the whatever, like, did you call a friend or a therapist
Right.
or
Right.
anyone just
Right.
to talk this through? Like, just
Yeah,
just
that's why
just talk it out.
when people are like comedy, like so I do like improv comedy, which for those of you who are not familiar, it's not stand up, it's a whose lines it anyway sort of things you've seen. It's basically either like improvised acting games or a whole play can be improvised. In fact, I do an
Right.
improvised telenovela where I play all the characters, but we can talk about
Amazing.
that
Yep.
in a little bit. But
Uh huh.
um some people would say like like when I started doing improv comedy, I used to say, "Oh, this is therapy to me." And then once I started going to therapy, I'm like, no, not the same. Right? I think it's good that art is therapeutic. It can be a therapeutic tool. Yes. But I think to unpack, because especially comedy, I mean, it's one of the oldest tropes, the sad, tears of a clown, the sad clown. Think about all the comics we've known that suffer through mental illness, that have ended their own lives, that have died from drug overdoses, or unfortunately, this is, and a lot of us became funny because of our trauma. It was a way, a way for us to process whatever was going on in our head. Just different ways of processing experiences, right? Yes. But yeah, it sometimes when I see other people on stage and they're talking about something, I'm like, you haven't worked through that, have you? Yeah. Or I've gone to story. There's the Moth is obviously the Story Slam is the most popular thing, right? But actually in Miami, there's shout out to them, True Story Miami. It's a storytelling night. It's not as strict as the Moth. They don't do the scoring system like the Moth does. You just come out and you share a story. It could be a little bit, the Moth, the story slams are 5 minutes. They'll give you 6 to 10 minutes, right? Or I've gone to other storytelling events where people are talking through a story. And sometimes it doesn't even come from a place of vulnerability, but it comes from a place of look at me, validate me, which is very hypocritical of me to say because I'm probably one of the most attention-seeking people I know. Jack, you can attest to that. Validate me. But you get what I'm saying? It's you can seek attention, for talents. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But have something there to back it up. Don't just brag about, oh, I took this cool trip in Africa. I went on safari. Yeah. But how did that make you feel? What did that change you? Did you, did you meet anyone that impacted you, or you know what I mean?
Does it matter to you?
Does it matter?
I know you're telling me because you're eliciting or you're hoping to elicit a reaction of wow, how special you are, how lucky you are, how cool that is.
Right.
I get it. But yeah, it's so, again, I think this is a topic that keeps coming up on this podcast is how much there's a desire to see black and white when the truth is there's so many fucking shades of gray.
Nuanced.
Right? It's so nuanced because I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be celebrated or to adapt up. If you have a great set, it is not weird or wrong for you to want to come off stage and be it would be fucking awesome if someone gave me a high five right now. Yeah, of course. I just killed it. Of course I want to be seen.
How many comics, I've, even ones that, for example, I did this one show and this guy had people in the palm of his hand. He got off stage and he asked me, how'd I do? And I'm like,
bro, you killed it.
I'm like, bro, motherfucker, did you not hear? They're like, well, I mean, it's hard to tell when you're up there sometimes. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm like, no, you did really well. People were really laughing. Man, you killed it. You did great, Yeah, it's okay to want praise. But I think sometimes people chase the praise too much, or people want to get to the praise quickly without doing the work. You get what I'm saying? People want the glory, but to get the glory, you gotta have the guts. Right. You gotta have the guts to fail. You have the guts to experiment and to put yourself out there. Yeah. I mean, there are times where I've bombed and I'm just like, why the fuck am I doing this? But then I'll remember the times I've done well and be like, in order to get to that, I gotta get through this.
Yes. 100%. And I want to put a parking lot in bombing because I actually think it's such an underrated human experience. As rough as it is, and I know it is rough.
So rough.
Ooh, boy, do you learn a lot about yourself and your
Yeah.
choices and why you're there and etc. The last thing I wanted to say on the previous point is like, I think what is hard to watch is people putting band-aids on cancer. It's
Yeah.
like you have a deep dislove of yourself and a deep mistrust of the world around you and the people in it. And you are feeding like the very, very top of the funnel, and the
Yeah.
bottom is fucked.
Yeah.
And like, to your point, like if you were just collecting high fives and, oh, that was great, or you're so nice, or I'm so glad you did that, versus like, no, like your whole fucking self is beautiful and your brokenness is beautiful and your
Yeah.
imperfections are beautiful. Like that's what you need to get to, which you don't get to without vulnerability, without sacrifice, without
Yeah.
taking risk, right? Like, and it's, I'm not suggesting it's easy, and it's certainly not fucking quick.
No.
But that mismatch is
Yeah.
it's a bizarre thing to watch on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. For sure. For sure.
Your worst bomb, like worst night you ever had. What's the story?
Oh, I'll tell you. I know exactly what night it was. So
People usually do.
I've been doing like improv and sketch for like 14 years. And I'm back to doing stand up now for like a year and a half now. But about 10, 11 years ago, I did stand up for about a year. I suffered through, I had a lot of anxiety and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know I had like an anxiety disorder. I started doing stand up, and towards like the last few months of doing stand up, I would get these horrible panic attacks before going up. And it would be to the point where sometimes I'd cancel gigs that I said I was going to go to, but, I was too panicked. I was too scared to go up. Part of it was like my mentality of like, what the fuck am I even doing? Some of it was, biochemistry. A good mix of two shitty things making a big shit bond.
Yes.
So I was at this open mic. It was all comics, and if any comic knows, a lot of open mics are filled with just the people that want to perform. I mean, you'll have like at all arts open mic, you might have more people who are non-artists show up because people want to see their friends perform music or whatever. But after a while, after you're doing comedy for a while, your friends are not going to come to every single one of your shows.
Yeah.
They might come out for like, hey, this is a show that like a bringer show, which basically you have to bring a certain amount of people to be able to perform. Right. So you might tell people, hey, can you come to the show so that way I have an audience that I could perform, right? But the bomb. I'm getting to the bomb now. So I was at this open mic. It was all comics. And on top of that, I was the only female comic, which is still, it's so weird that okay. Anyway, let me finish the story and I'll get to that observation. Yes. Linear line, get to the point, meandering. Okay, open mic, full of comics. It's like 10, 11 years ago. Male comics. I did the same jokes I'd always done. I changed a word or two, but it wasn't getting a reaction because these comics have heard these jokes 10,000 times. So I started freaking out so bad. I was having a panic attack on stage. I froze. I literally dropped a microphone, which, by the way, don't drop a microphone. That's audio equipment and it's expensive and someone paid for it. Don't drop a mic. Unless it's your own mic and you want to drop it, you want to damage your own audio equipment. But anyway, go for it. I dropped that mic in a bad way. I ran to the bathroom and I was heaving. Oh. My chest was tight. The walls were closing in. And then I'm like, oh my God, let me just get in my car. I get in my car, and one comic at the time was like, are you okay? I'm like, I can't breathe. My chest is really tight. And coincidentally, one of the comics who was there at the mic was a doctor. And he's like, you're having a panic attack. And I'm like, what? And again, I hadn't at this point gone to therapy for anxiety. I was like, but I'm dying. He's like, you're having a panic attack.
Panic attack.
And
which feels like dying, or how you expect dying to feel, which is a whole fucking thing.
A whole fucking thing.
It's a whole fucking thing.
It wasn't so much the worst bomb in the sense of, like, have I done worse than that? Probably. But it's probably the worst memorable bomb I have.
Yeah.
Because I think from that point on, I mean, 10 years later, I'm started doing stand-up again.
Right.
It took me 10 years from that event. Mind you, I went back, I've done other performing things like improv and sketch or, whatever, but
different modalities create different anxieties. Which I wouldn't have expected. Like, I've been pushing myself to get on stage as much as possible. So I've done some poetry performances, I've done some music performances, I've done some storytelling, and storytelling for me at this point is like unconscious. Like, I just know the rhythm. I feel so good about it. It's like, it feels so at home. That's awesome. Like, rap is feeling better. And because I'm learning how my movement matters, how my intonation matters, how my eye contact matters. Like, I'm figuring out the embodied performance. At first you're like, don't forget the words, dumbass. And then you remember them and you're like, but wait, like, that's still like, okay. Ooh. So I'm like, bottom of the thermometer. I have a long way to go.
Yeah. And I think that's so great that you said that, because I feel like too, I just want to be better. I just want to be a better artist. But I think picking something specific and working on it and mastering it, like, I always see myself as a performer, as a work in progress, like a constant work in progress. I'm constantly under construction, like much of the highways here in Miami. Constantly, like, as much
being dug up and broken and fixed,
and then just to be dug up and broken and fixed again. I try to always learn something when I'm performing or when I'm watching other people. I always try to learn something new, or that's why I record most of my sets. I don't really put them out there. Also because I have a day job they're kind of strict about social media stuff. So I don't put a whole lot of stuff up there. Also because I'm a little afraid, but I'm getting over that. Everything admitting it's the first step, right? But I'll record a lot of my stuff and I'll watch it back. And I hate watching myself. Some people are like, oh, you'll get used to it. I still haven't.
Yeah.
Listening to myself is a little easier because I don't have to see my motions and see I'm doing a lot of hand stuff right now, right? But yeah.
That's such a
I try to learn something every time.
Yeah. That's always such a weird thing though, right? Like, watching yourself is an edge, but it's an edge for basically all people. Like, there are some narcissists out there who fucking love watching themselves, and they have a whole other set of issues to work through that honestly I don't envy. I don't want those. I don't want that. But yeah, watching yourself, and like, I have this very vivid memory when I went to graduate school. We did this exercise where, like, you're in a room with like 5 or 6 other people and you have to solve this problem. You have like an hour to do it, maybe. It's like some stupid shit like the factory broke down and you're short on widgets. Like, how are you going to make more widgets?
Okay.
Yeah, whatever. So I'm watching this video, and like, what we're supposed to be focused on is like, are you collaborative? How well do you communicate? Are you a facilitator or someone who sits back, right?
Like those personality types.
All I'm watching is that for the entire time, I'm just like, I cannot get my fucking hand off my face, and I just have to watch it for an hour. And I'm engaged, right? Like, nothing about what I'm actually saying is problematic. I'm contributing to the group. I'm being supportive, but like, I'm like, why is my hand on my face the whole fucking time? And that's like, it's a high cost, because God, it's easy to hate yourself after you watch. You're just like, what are you doing? Why?
For sure.
Why would you do that? Ugh.
Yeah,
So anyway,
and when I
I
watch
feel you.
stuff on stage, like hand motions, the way I said something, or face I made, I'm like,
Why'd you do that? What was the
in the
purpose of that?
beginning, I don't know why I did this motion a lot. It was like it's like a sideways Obama, like, but it's this, but I'm like sautéing onions. I'm like, so as I was saying, I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this? Like,
It's
so
so fucking funny.
you also get to see like certain body language. Like, for example, there was one show where I'm like, man, excuse me. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry, I just ate. The blood is getting to my stomach. I'm just like,
You're in it right
don't
now.
worry.
I
I'm
get it.
riveted. I'm present. I'm here. I'm paying attention. I'm focused. See, I forgot what I was saying. There you go. I'm super focused.
On all the blood in your stomach. Yeah,
There you
you're
go. The blood in
present
my stomach.
to digestion. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
I forgot what I was saying. I literally did.
It's all good. That just talking about like gestures on stage. I feel
Yeah.
like that's something I appreciate more when I watch certain comics now. And
Yeah.
like I appreciate he's a little hot button for some people, but like, man, if you go and watch Dave Chappelle,
Yeah.
it's the way he's moving his arms around the mic
Yeah.
and using the mic as a prop. Like,
Yeah.
ooh, he's so fucking good. Like,
Yeah.
and it's what the piece about stand up that I am still learning to appreciate is it's not just the jokes or the
Right.
order of the jokes or the timing of the
Right.
jokes. There are so many details to how a set is built and put together that only exist because they did it over and over and over again.
Yeah,
And
and
I
I'm still
hate
building.
doing shit over and over again.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I've said these things over and over and over again. I'll change a word here and there to make it more succinct, or I'll add what's a tag. So basically, the structure of a joke is like you have your setup, which sets up one reality, and a punchline that kind of deviates from that reality, which is why it's funny, right?
Right.
So, for example, I have this joke about threesomes. I say that I'm like, threesomes are great because why try to please one person when you can disappoint two?
Yeah.
Thank you for laughing. That was a joke. Validation.
Very nice. Yes.
But you get what I'm saying?
Nailed
I'm
it.
setting up this thing. Threesomes are great because why try to please one person, right? The expectation is that I'm going to say when I could please two. But there's also this idea of people being bad at sex, right? It's like an embarrassment thing. It's like secondhand embarrassment. So
Yes.
when I say that punchline, people are like, aha, she's bad at sex. Aha. By the way, I'm married. It doesn't matter.
Yes. That box was checked. That ship has sailed. Thank you very much. I'm good.
My sex is my sex, guys. That's it. My husband's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Probably. I think he's in the bathroom. But anyway, he's hearing me. But you can also do tags, which means are like little, they're piggybacks to the original joke, right? So, you know, like you could say little things to kind of add a little more color to a joke or something, that are related topic and things like that. So yeah, I just, you know, I try to change things up a little bit from here and there, but I'm not married to any of my material. Like you know, I'm in a long-term civil union with them, but married I'm not. Because marriage is difficult to dissolve, right? And if you find something better, or you find something that is more your voice, you have to be okay with letting certain things go too. So
I think
that's what
sometimes
I'm
also,
finding.
yeah, like also as you find your authenticity, you realize that some of the shit you were saying isn't authentic, which is like half horrifying and half like, well, thank fucking God I figured that out.
Right.
Like, and so I'm now not like continuing to just say garbage that doesn't actually resonate with how I'm feeling.
Right.
Quick question though. How many times will you try a joke before you say like, all right, you're done?
Like, more times than I should probably give it up. I'll try like the way it's written one way. Like, let's say I came up with a joke and I say it one way. I might try it 2 or 3 times before I maybe at least try to change the wording or if it's got no reaction whatsoever, I just might shelf it for a bit and like come back to it and be like, okay, we gotta approach this a little differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to say like Tiffany Haddish said she would do something like 10 times. I don't think there's a wrong number. It is that like,
and I think it depends on what's wrong with the joke too. Because is the premise good? If the whole premise is bad, that's one thing. Or if it's like, I need to word it in such a way that I'm communicating this properly.
Right.
Because sometimes when a joke doesn't land, it's because there's not enough setup for it, but sometimes it doesn't land because there's too much setup, right? So yeah, like you said, there's a lot of little things that go into a set. You know, how you say something, like the face you make when you say something.
Right. How, when you feel like a joke isn't working, how clear of an intuitive sense do you feel like you have of which part isn't working? Or is it always like a black box of like, fuck, I don't know?
Sometimes the black box of fuck, I don't know. In the moment, I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Right. I might play it back and be like, oh, maybe I didn't say that word clearly. Or, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's just not that funny. But it takes me, unfortunately, when it comes to my material, you know, like, I'm not married to it, but, you know, I'll sometimes get stuck on really wanting to make something work. It's like fetch, like stop trying to make fetch happen.
Yeah.
With some jokes. So some of them right off the bat, like I'll say it out loud. And I'm like, no, this isn't good. Or there's some things where I'm like, okay, this just needs work. But for the most part, it's a process versus like an instant discovery. George Carlin used to say like he would know what would work on stage 99% of the time. And I'm not there yet. Maybe I will be one day, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he had a year or two of practicing the whole comedy thing to figure that out.
Yeah.
So wait, there's two things I want to circle to. One is women in comedy, and
oh my god,
would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, just women in comedy
you don't
in
have
general?
to. You tell me. Like it was clearly something where you're like, fuck.
Yeah. So I was so I did a podcast on Friday, and it was out of someone's car. It was kind of funny. Outside, there's this bar down in Miami called Thank You Miami. Shout out to Thank You Miami. They're great beer wine bar, and now they're doing like, you know, sake cocktails, and they're, you know, and the food's fantastic. Awesome. It's really good. So if you're ever in Miami, check them out. They're called Thank You Miami. They do a comedy show Mondays and Friday nights. So I was at the Friday night show. So in this car, like comics were coming in and out, but me and another comic were like booked as the main people on the podcast. And one of them asked, what do you think we can do to make this better for women? And I'm like, I mean, are you going to change misogyny all of a sudden? And sexism all of a sudden? That's literally what I said. I was like, I think it's just, you know, here's the thing. There's not a lot of, there's a lot more men than there are women doing comedy. And part of that is because men have controlled things for so long, right? And a lot of things were, you know, like men were the gatekeepers for a very long time, and in fact, are still a lot of the gatekeepers, right? So it hasn't been a very friendly environment for women for some time, mind you. Even women audiences, like I've had shows where I've been on stage, and there'll be a group of women in the table in front of me talking. And there was like, I'm like, bro, it's your own, and it's always your own people. Am I right? Like I was on stage, I'm like, it's always your own people. It's like women on women crime. And I go, I know you guys, the only women on women things you want to see are us like scissoring each other, which is not a fucking thing, by the way. It's not.
Separately.
They threw away the mic. I like pretending I'm on stage, right? See? And I'm like, you know, and I quoted Madeleine Albright, which said there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. I was like, oh yeah, our great prophet, Taylor Swift once said, because she said that about the whole Tina Fey, Amy Poehler thing about when they were joking about her, right?
Right.
But there was another time where like I was on stage, I had a pretty good set. I got off stage, and there's this woman who comes up to me, and she's like, "I usually don't like female comics, but I thought you were really funny." And I'm like, "I usually don't like bitches," and I walked away.
And in this case, it remains true. Thank you for your feedback. I don't appreciate it.
No, so I think there's a lot of. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, it's gonna take a lot to dismantle misogyny, but I think a lot of you know, the women not being funny thing is still a thing we have to like conquer. Women talking about their periods and their vaginas. I'm like, well, those are things women have. Men talk about their dicks all the time and talk about having sex all the time. Why can't women talk about those same things? You know? So yeah, I think, sorry, my husband just walked by. So I was like,
It's all good.
yeah,
I like,
no, sorry. But yeah, being a woman in comedy, I mean, when you see a lineup of all male comics, no one blinks an eye. You see a lineup of all female comics, it's a big to do.
yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Or this doesn't happen as often as it did 10 years ago when I first did stand up, but people will introduce me. This next comic, she's a lady, and like, you know, gender identity is a little more complicated, right? Than most people thought it was 10 years ago. So before I used to be like, wow, am I gonna have to show my vagina to prove it? But right. Obviously you could still identify as a woman and not have the physical parts, if you will, yes. Right? But you know, I still get introduced like that sometimes. Or there was like an open mic where, again, it was someone who was very drunk and heckling. The host was like, they have this line where they go, or they're at this open mic, they're like, oh, this next comic, they're a friend of the venue, and now they're a friend of yours. And then the person was like, and the person that was drunk, the heckler, was like, he's a friend of the bar, now he's a friend of ours. He's like, you're wrong because it's a she. You know? So there's still some misogyny and stuff like that to come over. And also, like, you know, the whole sexual harassment thing is not great. The whole not creating a safe environment for us to be able to, like, you know, talk just about certain things. Yeah. So, I mean, being a woman in comedy is not, you know, because you have misogyny, like, among male audience members, some male comics, but you also have internalized misogyny from, like, women, even, and women listening to you. Because, I mean, that's also part of misogyny, is pitting women against each other, too. I'm not saying, oh, you identify as a woman, so I have to agree with everything you say. I'm not saying that. But, like, maybe saying something like, I don't like female comics.
Right.
Like, as a woman saying that to me, I think that, I'm like, I still get floored by that. I'm like, you're not helping us out. You're not helping our cause here.
Right.
You know?
It's like, there's a... Again, at the risk of like oversimplifying an argument,
right?
I feel like there are versions of that in so many places.
Oh yeah,
like,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I don't like Thai food.
Right.
What does that mean? Like, Thai food is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different dishes.
Do you not like peanuts? Do you not like lemongrass? Do you not like soy? Right.
Is it a noodle problem? Is it a shrimp problem? Is it like?
Do you not like pad thai? Okay, maybe you like pad wusen, or you like satay, or, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah.
But in like, it's this weird like glossing over of like, yes, this whole thing, I'm not interested.
All female comics are not funny.
Right. And it's like, and exactly what you just said is actually, this came up on another episode. it's the differentiation between saying like I don't like or I'm not a fan of, which still sucks, but at least there's personal ownership,
Right.
versus like female comics, it just in general aren't funny. Like there's some objective truth to the
Right.
idea, and it's like like
Right.
your opinion is valid and I support it, and if you really genuinely don't like hearing women tell jokes, okay, I don't agree with you, but
Right.
that perspective is yours and it
Right.
lives within you, and that's where it ends.
But where is
The
that perspective coming from?
a, 1,000%,
Right. Like
1,000%.
where's that stem from? Like,
Yes.
is it like you got fucked over by a female comic and now you think all female comics aren't funny? You watched one female comic that you didn't like and now you paint everyone with that
Yeah.
that paintbrush. Did you grow up with like very misogynistic point of views around you, and that's just something that's the filter through which you're watching female comedians, or
Right.
right?
I mean,
So
maybe that's like, I mean, allyship is a fraught notion, but I do
yeah,
think like if someone were to say that and you could just ask them, do you remember when you started having that opinion or where it came
yeah.
from?
A lot of people
Like,
can't
was it
pinpoint
that
it.
for a whole host of reasons, but the fact that they can't pinpoint it is the very root of the problem, or
Yeah,
one of the roots of the problem. And
because
even
it's
just
not
bringing,
just one thing. It's multiple
so many
layers of things you have to unpack. Like
yes,
that. I mean, when you have a prejudice, a lot of times it's because the prejudice was reinforced by people in your like people around you.
yes,
So a lot of
people who
times,
loved you.
right? So it's like you have to do a lot of. I mean, how many things did I hear growing up that I had to unlearn now? You
Right,
know,
right.
or things I thought were funny that I'm like
Oh
think
shit.
about all those movies in the 80s and 90s that you could never like that could never be made now, right? But again,
Yeah.
it's we were like, oh, cancel culture. It's not so much cancel culture. It's just like, oh, this series of things was hurting a group of people, and
Yeah.
now we have enough awareness to know that it's hurtful. And trust me, there's plenty of other things you can joke about. Yeah,
The thing about cancel culture that I always find so funny is like, by definition, the way it would work in theory is that if someone were canceled, people would stop consuming it,
right.
but then people keep consuming it. So like, I'm speaking more from the perspective of people who complain like, "Oh, everyone gets canceled." It's like, you're like, the numbers will tell you if you're canceled. Like
Yeah,
DaBaby got
yeah,
fucking canceled
right,
hard, right? And
right.
like, ouch. Like,
Yeah,
people stopped fucking with him
right.
all the way. A lot of other people who have been named as like toxic, canceled, tragic, can't believe it, etc., like still doing bomb numbers, right?
Yeah,
Like still has tons of fans, still selling out shows, still like getting tons of streams, blah 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 blah.
yeah,
So it's like cancel culture exists only in so much as we as consumers
right,
stop consuming.
right. And
That's
not only that, too, I think here's the thing. So we have all these, organizations that bring awareness to, for example, you have the Human Rights Foundation, right? That brings a lot of LGBTQIA issues to light. And you have the NAACP that brings about all the things that all the, prejudice that Black people have faced for continue to face, right? In systemically across different, when it comes to law enforcement and housing and financial and yet all these things, right? And I
yes,
think, the point of activism, right, is to activate like the consciousness to part of it, right, is to make people aware that this is an issue, right?
right,
If it weren't for, you know, like Stonewall, for example, right? New York, like that happened, so now we could have now what 15 seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, and not to mention international versions of the show, all-star versions of the show.
Right.
But, you know, part of the point of activism and part of the point of speaking out about these issues is that's how people learn.
Yes.
And the reason that you're speaking out for people to learn is because people who think the opposite still exist.
Right.
So the thing that gets me about cancel culture is that, okay, fine, someone says something extremely fucked up. Okay, that was fucked up. But I think sometimes we're quick to judge versus like letting people learn the lesson. Because we can't cancel every time, you know, like, I mean, there's a good way of handling also when you've like, for example, the use of the word, again, I'm not saying it's wrong, the use of the word spaz, for example, with Lizzo.
Right.
She used it in a song, and a lot of the people, a lot of disabled people came out saying, look, it's an ableist term. It's, you know, it's kind of, it's a slur. It's a slur, right? And she came out, apologized, took the word out of her song. That's it. Like, hey, it's an offensive word. No problem. I got you. Took it out. And, or was it Beyonce? Beyonce, I think, had that issue too.
Yeah.
But it's, I think when you, I think it's a fine line because you also have to give people the opportunity to learn the lesson.
Yep.
And also, how many things have you done in your past that you're not proud of? Like, when I become famous, am I going to have to admit to everything I ever did wrong in my past? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's this weird, don't get me, again, you should call out people when they do something wrong. That's fine.
For sure. I think there's a funny intersection, right? Because like,
yeah.
I'm not saying that cancel culture and prison reform are one and one,
Right.
but there's a larger conversation around like, what does it mean to incarcerate someone, to put someone in prison, to
Right.
punish someone? Like, do we believe in an arc of redemption? Do we believe that people can learn from their mistakes and their
Right.
wrongs?
Do you
And there's
believe
an
in second
overwhelming
chances, or do you believe in, is it just punitive and not rehabilitative at all?
right.
You
Right.
know?
And I feel like I don't speak for everyone, obviously. There
Right.
is certainly a voice for like, yes, there is redemption, there is learning, there is opportunity.
Right.
Like people can live lives beyond mistakes that they made in the past. It's like awesome. So if someone says something fucking stupid, for sure, let them know. Like if they had privileges before that need to be taken away or minimized, like, yep, that's a reasonable punishment.
Yeah.
But there has to be a path forward. There has to be a way to
Absolutely.
be in dialogue. And I do think it is up to the person who made the mistake to create the dialogue, to seek the dialogue,
Yeah.
to be a participant in the dialogue, not just say like, teach me how to be tolerant. Like, fuck that.
I think you have to do the work. I mean, there's this improviser that she was based out of Florida, but now she's in New York. She actually does a lot of stuff with North Coast. Stephanie Ray, she has a group called the Black Improv Alliance. She's great. She's done a lot of stuff with the Freestyle of Supreme Academy.
Shout out.
Because if not, I mean, I would have not met cool people like Jack Dawkins over here.
Thanks.
But you know, she said something like, Google is free. You know, it's not my job as this person representing, she's a proud, talented Black woman, right? She's like, it's not my job to educate you on the trials and tribulations of, she brings her Blackness to her art, which is, she's great. She's fantastic. I can't sing her praises enough. I think she's great, but I mean, it's, for example, I'm a light-skinned Latina, right? I'm very much white passing, right? Colorism. That's another, all the isms, right? But, it's on me to realize, okay, if someone tells me, hey, that's insensitive, guess what? I can't be like, oh, please sit down and make me feel less guilty about what I just did. It's not for them to absolve me. Right. You know what I mean? It's up to me to do the work and learn what I did wrong and don't do it again. And also call out people when they're doing something wrong.
Yes.
Because ultimately to stay quiet is to be complicit, So, and that's a hard thing too, because we all want to be Switzerland. You know, we don't want to get involved.
Mm.
We just want to, but
Yeah.
you
I mean,
know,
like, this is
yeah,
a,
Google is
oh, I
free.
totally know. Google
Google is
is
free.
super fucking free.
Yeah.
The,
So, and when Steph said that one time, I think it was like I did a show with her because I was part of an improv troupe and we had no black members in that troupe. And it was Black History Month, and we're like, why don't we just have the Black Improv Alliance take our slot? Like, we'll manage the stage stuff and we'll, but let them, and we'll, if they need to cast us in anything, sure, but let's let them run the show, and but that shouldn't have to be the case. We should have more people of color in the arts,
yes.
and
Yes.
not have. But that's a whole other. Bro, I'm opening a can of worms. That how many
to
hours
say,
we have? But no,
we'll get around to. No,
right?
the one other thing I was gonna say is like, and I don't know how much this has come up on the podcast. Like, I feel very torn because I have read and I understand a perspective that like there is not a good place for white people in hip hop, and I get it. I
Yeah,
understand that perspective. The piece that I find so interesting though is that because I'm creating this music and I'm participating in this culture,
right.
I am having these conversations so much more often. And I am learning where I am getting it right and where I'm not. And like
Right.
I'm not saying that people should start rapping or getting into black culture to learn these lessons. That is certainly not the only way. But I
Right.
do think that, to your point about Switzerland, it's so easy to say like, oh, cool, I won't touch it. I'll be removed from it. I'll step
Yeah.
back from it and I'll just absolve myself by non-participation.
Right.
And that actually doesn't work. You have to be actively engaged
Yeah.
in the dialogue, in the conversation with people who are experiencing these things.
Yeah.
And so
I
like
think it's like, okay, hip hop was started by black people, right?
100%.
Right. This is a black art form. And I
Yes.
think it's to say like, okay, you fuck with my art form, but you don't fuck with my issues. Like, you here's the thing. I think culture is an evolving thing, and cultural appropriation is just one of those things that, like, it's a hard thing to approach, because when people take things from your culture, it's because, for example, like, I just had pho for I love Vietnamese food. I think
So
it's great.
fucking good.
It's amazing. But how hypocritical would it for me, for example, to be like, oh, I love pho, but I hate Vietnamese people. I do not hate anyone. I do not hate a group of people.
Don't cut that clip out of context.
Right, please.
Diane saying I hate Vietnamese people.
No, no.
Perfect.
But what I'm saying is, like, and I think that's a lot of, like, for example, like when the Kardashians do the boxer braids, and people, like, okay, you listen to hip hop music, and you, like, not even like, if you you're a very skillful MC, you're wordsmith, bro, you're like amazing. But you think about even someone who's listening to hip hop on the other, who's a hip hop fan, right? They're like, yeah, you listen to all this art produced by a certain group of people, but when those certain group of people need others to speak out for them, you're on the sidelines. So it's like, you fuck with my music, but you don't fuck with me as a person. Like, you're not actively speaking out against people that are trying to actively stifle me,
Yes.
or actively trying to make my life more difficult just because of the color of my skin. Right. Um, and this is, yeah. And I think it's really hard, right? Because you have a lot of different cultures and a lot of different, and these are things that, like, I think we're all still figuring out in terms of, like, what's cultural appropriation, what isn't, you know. Like, for example, like, I'm sure, like, a lot of people wear, like, those Mexican big hats and wear, like, the bandito costumes, realizing, oh, that's like a hurtful stereotype, right? Not everyone in Mexico is like that.
Right.
Or making someone's culture a costume or an outfit, or so it's like, do we own anything even? You know what I mean? Like, is once it's out there, is it just the world's, or is it's again, I try to be respectful of cultures as much as possible, right? But
Yes.
there's a lot of these like nuances that I don't know how to answer. I'll try to
Right.
respectfully live my life, you know?
There's a funny parallel that I'm just realizing, and it's between like this idea of culture and appropriation in art, which is like, it is not our job to get it right or to get it perfect. It's our
Right.
job to show up desiring to be better.
Yep.
So like, I can't live my life in hopes of never being wrong,
Yeah. Yes.
because my lack of impact, or at worst my negative impact, is going to be so overshadowed,
Right.
rather than if I just show up and make the attempt and accept that I might get it wrong, and
Right.
then hopefully have the courage to not again beat the shit out of myself and be like, ooh, fuck that up.
Yeah.
I got to do the work. Let me go search, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. We're all gonna make mistakes. I think if you're living life, um, you're making mistakes,
That will
and if
happen.
you live your life in fear of making mistakes, you're still gonna make them. It's just gonna hurt more when you make
It's
them.
going to hurt a lot more. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Diane, Majesty, this was magic.
Thank
You
you.
so much
Thank you
for
so much.
sharing some time with me. I
I hope
appreciate
I
you.
didn't blab too much.
No, I like,
This is
part
so
of the
crazy
reason
how
I
many
love,
different topics came up, you know?
but that's what's so fun. That's why I love not having a format, because like, I couldn't have told you we were going to get into race and appropriation. I'm grateful that we did.
Yeah, it's so
I'm
crazy how
glad
we
to have
got
shared
into
the
that
space.
because there's some material I've written about like my racial identity and some of the weird, again, like, you know, things I found in my family history that I've tried to address, and you know, it's and I have a hard time with that. Like, I haven't said the material out loud a lot because I still want to make sure I'm not crossing any lines, like a hurtful lines. You know what I mean? Like,
I totally get it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You're gonna ruffle feathers. I think like as comedians, it's part of the
Gig.
it's part of the gig. But I think I want to make sure I'm ruffling feathers because it's a point of view versus like just saying something to say something.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
But thank you so much.
We should do this again.
Yes.
That would be a joy.
That'd be amazing. Thank you so much.
Go see Diane if you're in Miami.
Yeah.
She has all the shows, all the stuff. And
yeah.
We'll get more details and we'll share it in the show notes. But in the meantime, have a beautiful, beautiful day. I appreciate you.
Bye, everyone. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Stage Dive, and I hope that you enjoyed it. New episodes drop each and every Wednesday. You can find highlights and clips of these conversations on TikTok and Instagram using the handle @StageDivePodcast. If you have any questions for us, want to be featured on the show, or have anything else to send, you can always email us at stagedivepodcast@gmail.com. This is Jack Dawkins, and no matter how you're performing in the world today, I want you to know that you are loved. Take care.